A man let a freezing grizzly bear and her cubs into his home. Then the unthinkable happened. What happens next will leave you speechless. A scraping sound tore through the howl of the wind. Evan Calloway froze, his hand hovering over the latch of the small stove as the fire sputtered and crackled behind him. The blizzard outside had been raging for hours, pressing against the cabin like an angry animal trying to claw its way inside. But this sound was different, closer, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. Another scrape. Then a low, guttural noise that made the hair rise at the back of his neck. He grabbed the lantern from the table, its glass fogging instantly from his breath as he moved toward the door. His boots thudded against the wooden planks, the lantern's light trembling with every gust that forced its way through the cracks. Evan held his breath, pressed his ear to the door, and listened. Through the roar of snow and wind came another sound, a sharp, desperate whine, high-pitched and short-lived. Not human, not entirely wild either. He unbolted the door. The instant it cracked open, the storm punched him in the chest, filling the air with ice and darkness. In that chaotic blur, two glistening eyes reflected the lantern light. His heart seized. A shape moved just beyond the threshold, broad and heaving. Then it stepped forward. A grizzly bear. Its massive head was rimmed with frost, fur matted with snow. Behind her, two tiny shapes shivered violently, huddled against her legs. She made no sound, but her breath steamed like smoke in the bitter air, and the muscles along her shoulders trembled, not with aggression, but exhaustion. Evan's first instinct was to slam the door shut and bar it tight. No sane man let a bear in his home. But when he saw the cubs, saw the ice clinging to their faces, and the way their little legs wobbled as they tried to stand, something in his chest shifted. His hand lingered on the edge of the door. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath, voice barely audible over the storm. The mother bear took another step, lowering her head slightly. Not threatening, pleading, if such a thing were possible from an animal like her. "All right," Evan said, heart pounding so loud it drowned out his own words. "All right, come on." He swung the door wide. The bear shoved through, her bulk brushing the frame. The cubs stumbled inside, squealing softly, leaving a trail of snow and melting ice on the floorboards. Evan shut the door hard against the gale and dropped the bar into place, leaning his back against it as if holding the weight of the entire mountain. The cabin instantly shrank. The bear filled half the room, shaking violently, clumps of snow flying off her coat. The cubs pressed close to her belly. Evan backed away slowly, his boots slipping on the wet floor. His pulse raced, but he kept his voice steady. "Stay over there. Fireplace is yours. I'll figure this out." She didn't move closer. She just watched him, dark eyes glinting in the lantern glow, chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Evan worked quickly, shoving the small table aside and dragging an old chair across the room to form a crude barricade between the kitchen and living space. The bear guided her cubs toward the warmth, curling around them as they huddled on the braided rug near the hearth. Evan added more wood to the fire, forcing it to roar to life. Heat filled the room, but so did the weight of danger. He kept his axe within arm's reach, resting it against the wall by his cot. When he finally sank onto the edge of the bed, his hands trembled, not from cold, but from the knowledge that he'd just invited death inside his home. The hours crawled by. Snow lashed against the windows, drumming like impatient fingers. The bear didn't sleep. She kept her head lifted, eyes half closed but vigilant. Evan didn't sleep either. His thoughts churned. What if she panicked? What if she attacked? He told himself over and over that dawn would bring a way out, that the storm would break, and they'd all go their separate ways. But the longer he watched her, the more he realized she wasn't just seeking shelter. She was guarding something, guarding them from something. Near midnight, he stepped quietly toward the window to check the snow level. His boots crunched softly on the boards. The storm's fury blurred everything beyond the glass. Yet under the swirl of snowflakes, something caught his eye. Deep gouges etched into the porch railing. Not the smooth, rounded marks of a bear's claws, but sharp, deliberate cuts, almost like a knife scraping wood. He frowned and opened the door just enough to peer outside. Fresh boot prints led from the edge of the clearing to his woodshed. Evan's breath clouded the air as a shiver ran through him, colder than the wind itself. No neighbor would be wandering this far in such a storm, and no one sane would come up here without announcing themselves. He eased the door shut, bolted it again, and turned back to the room. The bear had risen slightly, hackles twitching, nose pointed toward the door as if she, too, sensed something unnatural in the storm. "You hear it too, don't you?" Evan whispered. His voice sounded thin and strange to his own ears. The bear didn't answer, but the look in her eyes was enough. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of something out there. That night, Evan sat with his back against the wall, lantern dimmed, axe across his knees, staring at the door while the wind screamed. The bear never looked away from him, her breathing slow and steady, cubs nestled safely at her side. But in the silence between the gusts, he thought he heard another sound, distant but real. Footsteps crunching over frozen snow. Not wandering, approaching. Someone, or something, else had been near. Snow battered the cabin as though the mountain itself wanted Evan Calloway buried. The second morning brought no light, just a gray blur pressing against the windows and swallowing the trees whole. Evan boiled the last of his oats, portioning a meager cup for himself and pushing the rest toward the massive bear and her cubs huddled by the fire. The mother eyed him carefully, then lowered her head to nudge the food toward her cubs first. "You eat too," Evan murmured, voice hoarse from cold and lack of sleep. He pushed the tin pan closer with the end of a broom handle, careful to keep distance. Storm's not letting up. We'll all need the strength he hadn't planned to share his food with wild animals, but watching the cubs' ribs moving under their thin coats made the decision for him. He tore his last loaf of bread into strips and watched as the cubs clumsily chewed them, their small jaws crunching in rhythm with the groaning timbers of the cabin. Through the long day, Evan studied them. The mother never turned her back to the windows. When the wind rattled the shutters, she gave a low, warning growl, not at him, but at the door, as if expecting someone to walk through it. Evan followed her gaze more than once, seeing nothing but swirling white. Still, the unease was contagious. By nightfall, the cabin felt colder despite the roaring fire. Evan stretched out on his cot, axe propped against the wall within reach. He drifted in and out of a shallow doze until a sound pulled him awake. Heavy thuds above his head. Footsteps. Evan's pulse hammered in his ears. This wasn't shifting snow or loose branches. These were measured, deliberate steps pacing across the roof. He crept to the window, easing the shutter open just a fraction. The wind whipped in, stinging his face. Beyond the storm, he caught a faint glow, lantern light, moving in the trees to the east. "Who's there?" Evan called sharply, voice swallowed by the storm. No answer came, only the crunch of something withdrawing into the distance, then silence. He didn't sleep after that. When dawn broke, weak and colorless, Evan pulled on his coat and boots and pushed outside. The cold bit deep, sharp enough to steal his breath. He trudged to the woodshed, only to find the door hanging loose. Inside, where he'd stacked enough firewood to last another week, half the pile was gone, and there were no tracks leading to or from the shed. The snow was pristine, as though someone had walked without touching the ground. Evan returned to the cabin, jaw tight. He set to work rigging crude alarms, wires tied to empty tin cans, trip ropes near the tree line, anything to warn him of another approach. Between tasks, he scribbled in his leather journal, recording every sound, every strange shadow, every track that didn't belong. Late that afternoon, while mending a warped floorboard near the hearth, Evan's crowbar struck something metal beneath the planks. He pried them up and uncovered an old, rusted rifle wrapped in oilskin. The weapon smelled faintly of mildew, as though it had been hidden for decades. He wiped the grime from its barrel, reading faint initials carved into the stock. J.H. He remembered the stories. Jonas Hale, the cabin's previous owner, had disappeared one winter without a trace. "Guess you left me a gift," Evan muttered grimly, setting the rifle aside to clean it later. Evening fell, the wind slackening for the first time in days. Evan went to the window and unlatched the shutter to check the tree line. That's when he heard it. Faint shouting, carried on the cold air. A man's voice, harsh and ragged, echoing through the trees. "Get back here!" the voice roared, broken by static and distance. The bear reacted instantly. She reared up on her hind legs, letting out a deep guttural roar that shook the walls. The cubs yelped and scrambled under the table as she crashed into the barricade Evan had built, splintering the chair legs. Her eyes blazed with panic and rage, as though the voice belonged to something she already knew. Evan raised his hands, heart racing. "Easy, easy!" He backed toward the corner, keeping his tone calm though his breath came fast. The mother bear turned, placing herself squarely between Evan and her cubs, trembling with adrenaline. The shouting outside faded, swallowed by wind. But the message was clear. Someone was out there, close enough to track this bear through a storm, close enough to shout with murderous intent. Evan tightened his grip on the axe, his mind racing. If they were after her, they wouldn't hesitate to kill anything standing in the way, including him. The crash of splintering wood tore through the cabin like a gunshot. Evan spun from the hearth just in time to see a crowbar slam through the side window, scattering shards of glass across the floor. His makeshift alarm wires rattled madly outside. The door shuddered against pounding fists. Two figures in heavy coats, faces shadowed by scarves and hoods, were forcing their way in. Before Evan could reach for the axe, the mother bear let out a deafening roar and charged. She hit the window frame with bone-jarring force, splintering the sill as she plowed straight into the first man. He crashed back against the wall with a grunt, his weapon tumbling from his hand. The cub squealed and scrambled under the table as furniture overturned. The second intruder raised a rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the room, the bullet whining past Evan's shoulder before grazing the bear's flank. She roared in pain and fury, spinning toward the shooter. Evan lunged before the man could fire again. The two of them collided, slamming hard against the floor. The rifle clattered away. Evan grappled for control, his fingers numb from cold but locked with desperation. They rolled over broken glass and torn rugs until Evan managed to wrench the weapon free. As he brought it up, his eyes caught on a black patch stitched into the man's coat sleeve, a pine tree over crossed antlers. Recognition struck like ice water. Black timber. The poaching ring whispered about in every Breckmore tavern and hunting camp, men known for killing rare animals and vanishing into the mountains before lawmen could blink. The first man staggered to his feet, blood seeping through his coat where the bear had raked him. Without a word, he fled through the broken window, stumbling into the storm. The bear barreled after him, leaving a crimson trail in the snow. Breathing hard, Evan jammed the rifle barrel under the second man's chin. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice low but shaking with adrenaline. The man sneered, his teeth glinting under the lantern light. "You've got no idea what you're in the middle of, friend." "I know that patch," Evan snapped. "Black timber. Why the bear?" The man's eyes flicked to the door as if hoping for rescue. "That's no ordinary grizzly," he said, voice dripping contempt. "She's tagged. Private lab work, behavior mods, worth more than your cabin and everything in it. You think she just wandered here? We've been tracking her for weeks." Evan felt his grip tighten on the rifle. "What lab?" The man's lips curled into a cold smile. "Wouldn't matter if I told you. They'll have her by sunrise." The door banged open with a thunderous crash as the bear returned, blood streaking her flank but her eyes blazing. She spotted the man pinned to the floor and roared, advancing on him with murder in her gaze. The cubs peeked out from under the table, trembling. Evan faced an impossible choice. Let the bear kill this man and rid himself of one threat, or keep him alive for answers. As the bear lunged, Evan swung the rifle stock like a club, cracking it against the man's temple. The poacher went limp. Evan quickly bound his wrists and ankles with rope scavenged from his workbench. "You're staying put," Evan muttered, shoving the unconscious man into the corner and wedging a chair over him. Dawn crept gray and cold through the broken window. Evan rubbed his eyes, exhausted but wired. The mother bear paced restlessly, sniffing at the door. Something was wrong. The cabin felt too quiet. Then Evan realized what was missing. The cubs were gone. He rushed outside, rifle in hand. The storm had slowed but still bit at his face. In the snow beside the cabin were fresh tracks, tiny paw prints winding away toward the trees, paired with deep boot prints. The second man hadn't fled empty-handed. He'd taken the cubs. Evan spun on his heel and glared back at the tied man inside the cabin. "You're lucky I don't end you right now," he growled, snatching up extra cartridges. He slung the old rifle Jonas Hale had hidden beneath the floorboards across his back and set off into the storm. The trail led down a narrow game path, twisting between pines heavy with snow. Evan moved fast, heart pounding, every step crunching loud in the silence. He scanned the woods, wary of ambush. The bear followed close behind, her breath steaming in the freezing air, her wound still seeping but her eyes fixed on the path ahead. After a mile, the trail dipped into a ravine. Evan crouched at the edge, eyes narrowing. Below, half buried under fresh snow, sat a vehicle, a camouflaged truck with its engine idling faintly and crates stacked in the bed. Beside it, a steel cage rattled with frightened cries. The cubs. Evan's stomach turned to ice. He slid carefully down the slope, rifle ready. Through the swirling snow, he spotted tranquilizer rifles propped against the truck, their barrels gleaming dully. The second poacher paced near the cage, checking his watch, oblivious to Evan crouched above. Evan tightened his grip, breath shallow. He could feel the mother bear trembling behind him, muscles coiled to spring. Whatever happened next, it would decide whether they lived or died. The rope burned against Evan's palms as he heaved, muscles straining with every pull. Snowflakes clung to his eyelashes, blinding him, but he refused to let go. The cage dangled precariously over the ravine, its steel frame creaking under the weight of two terrified cubs. They huddled together inside, whimpering softly, their small bodies trembling with cold and fear. Evan's improvised pulley system, a rough contraption of rope, a broken sled runner, and a beam hacked from a fallen spruce, groaned under the strain. "Come on," he muttered under his breath fogging in the icy air. His fingers were raw, his arms screaming for relief, but the thought of leaving them to die was unbearable. The wind howled like a living thing, whipping at his coat, slashing his cheeks with needles of snow. Every second stretched into an eternity as he fought the storm and the weight of the steel trap. The cage rose inch by inch, scraping against the icy wall of the ravine. Evan could see the cub's eyes now, wide and desperate, reflecting his lantern light. He pulled harder, gritting his teeth, ignoring the pain in his shoulders. "Almost there," he said, though no one was there to hear except the cubs, and maybe their mother, somewhere out in the storm. Then, from behind him, a voice cut through the wind. "You're making a big mistake." Evan froze, his heart slamming against his ribs. The voice was rough, low, and much too close. Slowly, he turned his head. The surviving poacher stood there, snow crusting his coat, a rifle leveled at Evan's back. His face was gaunt under the hood, eyes like cold chips of slate. The man's breath came in ragged clouds as he stepped closer, boots crunching softly in the snow. Evan didn't speak. His mind raced. He'd left the cabin thinking the man was still tied, unconscious, and bleeding. Somehow, he'd escaped. The bloody rope fibers Evan had noticed near the door flashed in his mind. He should have checked, should have made sure. "Drop the rope," the man said, voice calm but edged with threat. The barrel of the rifle glinted as it tracked Evan's movements. "Step away!" Now Evan's pulse thundered in his ears. The cage was halfway up. If he let go, it would tumble back into the ravine, and the cubs with it. He swallowed hard, feeling the rope bite deeper into his raw hands. "They're just animals," Evan said quietly, buying time, his voice rough from the cold. "Their property," the man corrected, eyes narrowing. He shifted his stance slightly, digging his boots into the snow for stability. "Worth more than your cabin, more than your life. Walk away, and maybe I let you live." Evan's jaw tightened. "What about the other man?" he asked, stalling, scanning for an opening. The poacher's lips curled into a thin smile. "He's dead," the man said flatly. "And so are you if you don't move." The wind surged, lifting a swirl of powder between them. Evan's muscles tensed. He needed an opening, a distraction, anything. His axe was out of reach, lying near the sled, half buried in snow. The rifle slung over his shoulder was useless. He'd never get it up in time. The poacher's finger tightened on the trigger. A shadow moved in the storm. There was no sound at first, just a shift in the white haze, like the wind itself had grown solid. Then came the crunch, heavy paws pounding through snow, the low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the frozen ground. The poacher's eyes flicked to the side, and in that split second, Evan dove. The rifle barked, the shot cracking through the night, the muzzle flash searing Evan's vision. He hit the snow hard, rolling, feeling the icy burn along his cheek. The rope slipped from his hands, the cage lurching violently, but before it could fall, the beam wedged against the pulley jammed, locking it in place. Evan scrambled to his knees, lunging for the man. They collided in a tangle of limbs, the rifle spinning out of reach, vanishing into the snow. The poacher slammed a fist into Evan's ribs, driving the air from his lungs, but Evan clung on, grappling, fueled by desperation and raw will. They rolled toward the ravine's edge, snow breaking loose beneath them. Then the growl became a roar. The bear hit like an avalanche. The mother grizzly exploded from the storm, her massive body a blur of muscle and fury. She struck the poacher with the force of a battering ram, sending him sprawling. His scream cut short as he tumbled over the edge, vanishing into the white abyss below. The sound of his body crashing against the rocks was swallowed by the wind. Evan lay there, chest heaving, staring in disbelief as the bear loomed over him, her breath steaming, blood streaking her fur from an old wound. Her eyes locked on his for a heartbeat, wild, burning, but not mindless. Then she turned, lumbering to the cage. The cubs squealed, pressing against the bars as their mother tore into the steel trap. Her claws raked, her jaws crushed metal like tin. Evan staggered to his feet, grabbed his axe, and swung at the frozen hinge. Sparks flew. The bear yanked, twisted, and with a final screech of tortured steel, the door gave way. The cubs bolted out, burying themselves against her massive frame. She sniffed them frantically, licking their fur, grumbling low in her throat. Evan stood back, axe hanging limp in his hand, chest burning with exhaustion and cold. He didn't move, didn't speak. The storm howled around them, but in that moment, the only sound was the bear's heavy breathing. Finally, she looked at him again. For a long, terrible second, Evan thought she might turn on him. But instead, she brushed past, the cubs trailing close, vanishing into the white void like spirits returning to the wild. Evan sagged against the nearest tree, feeling his strength bleed out into the snow. His hands shook as he picked up the fallen rifle, not for defense now, but because he couldn't leave it behind. Slowly, painfully, he made his way back to the cabin, dragging his sled through the drifts. The wind clawed at his face, but the storm was breaking. Through the gaps in the clouds, pale dawn light spilled across the mountains. Smoke rose from the chimney by the time he reached home, the fire inside still alive. He stumbled through the door and froze. The corner where the tied poacher had been was empty. Bloodied rope fibers lay scattered like dead worms on the floorboards, crimson against the wood. The man was gone, vanished without a trace. A chill ran deeper than the cold through Evan's spine. He shut the door, bolted it, and sank against the wall, rifle across his knees, staring into the flames as questions gnawed at him. Hours later, the distant hum of engines cut through the quiet. Rescue crews, bright in their orange parkas, came trudging through the trees, alerted by a passing ranger who had spotted the smoke. They found evidence of the fight: broken furniture, shattered glass, blood on the snow. They found illegal traps, weapons, signs of poaching. But no bodies, no proof of what Evan had endured. Only his word. Weeks passed before the mountains loosened winter's grip. Back in Breckmore, Evan moved through life like a man carrying a secret carved into his bones. The locals talked about the storm, the outages, the rumors of poachers. But no one knew the truth. Not about the men, not about the bear, not about the strange symbol burned into the patches on their coats. Until one night. He was stacking firewood by the cabin, spring rain dripping through the eaves, when his boot struck something under the floorboards. A metallic click. He knelt, pried up the plank, and stared. A transmitter, small and sleek, hidden deep beneath the wood. A red light blinked faintly, almost dead. Someone had been tracking the bear long before she ever reached his door. Maybe tracking him too. As the last of the snow melted, Evan saw her again. At the edge of the woods, the mother bear with her cubs. Alive, free, but scarred. He felt a flicker of relief, and then his eyes caught the black truck parked on the distant ridge. Two men sat inside, watching. Evan's breath slowed. The winter ordeal was over, but as the truck's engine rumbled and the figures lingered, he knew with a cold certainty that the story wasn't finished. The bear was never just an animal in need. It was a living secret someone is desperate to recover. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of unexpected kindness, animal intelligence, and the deep emotional bonds that can form between humans and nature. This narrative aims to inspire empathy and a deeper appreciation for the extraordinary connections that can be found in the most unlikely of places.